And yet another fantastic full orchestration of the Barvinsky Prelude in G from Peter this time. And Peter, you did a phenomenal job. The orchestration is obviously beautifully worked out, and the mock-up sounds fantastic. And I mean, within reason. I mean, they're like the articulation is a little strange. Like the intensity of the of the bite to the bow on these. It's obviously that is not what you would hear in a standard orchestra, uh, but yeah, really, really great stuff. And I completely give you a pass on questions like a lot of tenuto marks in a row. Obviously, as a string player, you understand what that means. Kind of nice long bows. You threw in. I mean, this is probably unnecessary. I can't imagine a pro string player not understanding that this should be an up bow, crescendo into the downbeat and so on. But I mean, this though, this is something that like would get added into a part to change the bow in the middle, especially to negotiate like not only a very long duration but also a push into the next bar. So it's as far as it goes as a something for me to pass on to the rest of the crowd, it is very welcome. So yeah, so let's just once again start backwards from the end first, and then I'll jump back to D, and then I will check out or evaluate the first three sections. So, just kind of jumping back to the way that you shaped the ending here. Now, of course, Barvinsky, in his original score, wants things to just stay, just to keep pounding away till like the downbeat of the first bar of E. So you built in this gradual diminuendo all the way through, and for the approach that you used, it works really, really great, right? And especially for you wanting to get a specific color right in here, that's pretty heavy in the middle winds and horns, and then kind of giving over to pizzicato and tuba, which we'll talk about in a minute. So I wanted differences of approach, so I'm not going to complain too much about people throwing in diminuendo before E, and especially if it helps you to come up with this kind of color. About the only kind of observation I would make, and this is something you can completely disregard, but in the piano score, these pitches last a full 2 bars, right? And if you're thinking about the decay of the piano sounds, you can kind of hear them decaying into nothing right around here. So, I don't think it would hurt anything if the sustain at least lasted till the downbeat here, and then maybe decayed over the length of half a bar, you know. And I don't think it would hurt either to have a destination dynamic, right? So I mean, we're trending downwards from mezzo piano diminuendo to piano, right? Diminuendo to what, right? I would almost be tempted to write triple piano at the end of the horn parts, and and then but maybe not worry about the winds. Obviously, they're going to go down to pianissimo, but just to really just bring it in to nothingness, without going to without saying niente or anything like that, or just just using the the natural ability of the wind player to soften and then round out the end of their articulation, right? Is what we want rather than niente for anybody who's watching. Peter knows this. Okay. Yeah, so now here we have a combination pianissimo tuba, soft pizzicato in double basses. It's a good combination. I don't know if you need the extra weight of the tenuto here, right? But I mean, it does make an interesting combination because it makes the pizzicato feel fuller, right? But it's just a question of like how able, how absolutely perfectly beautifully incredibly nuanced is tuba down there in its lowest octave, and a lot of kind of semi-pro tuba players might have a different idea than stone cold pro tuba players who can blow out they can blow out a candle, or they can blow out a match at an arm's reach. They can blow out a match like at 2 arms reach practically. Their directed breath is so amazing. So so it's just something to think about. And then here we have muted strings. And I have to say, like, this was also another kind of slightly disappointing sound from the sound set. Right, I felt that it didn't quite really capture that beautiful, extraordinary quality of muted strings there. They just sort of sounded kind of dull, right? Rather than having that just wonderful, almost breathy, front of the skull type of quality. But still, the scoring is great. Absolutely no question. Yeah, and once again, like the down bow marking here, I would consider that, to be unnecessary. I mean, I can't imagine this being played any other way, but, fair enough. Yeah, I mean, if you look at it, if this really is going to be down, up, down, up, down, up, then it's going to end up down, right? If we're going to take separate directions and bows on every single note. But it's still, I like the way this all works together. All right, so now we're getting into this, and I love the way you bring in the viola right in here, and make that just adding another octave onto the melody, right, with the strings above and some bassoons. Yeah, just really wonderful, thoughtful use of nuances and of like textures that follow each other really beautifully. I mean, all the way through. Then the melody being picked up here, clarinets and bass clarinets, or first clarinet and bass clarinet. Yeah, and that works pretty good. Yeah, I mean, I think that if you're going to be using numbers, then you can just say 1 here, and you don't need the second voice rest, really, because there's like nothing complex happening here at all. And the same thing here, you just write number 1 here, right? And then you can just dispense with these, little boxes hanging off the bottom of the staff, right? And same thing here, right? I think you could just tell us that it's the first. If you're going to tell us the first player, you don't need the rest at all, right? Okay, so ba-da-da-dum, and then you answer with a different color, and then with pizzicato punctuating. Yeah, this all works great. Great combination, and here you have interwoven the wind harmony, and since the second flute is not very low and there's no and the sound is soft, then you can get away with this mixture with a second flute in the middle, right? but I wouldn't get too adventurous with that approach. Right, but it's really great. You know the answering voice is English horn and bassoons, so that also works great. Right, and then once again long bows. Right. Yeah. Da 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 da. Just a nice unison across 2 octaves. And it was really lovely the way that you nuanced this, right? You were you wanted to push here and then push again into mezzo forte, but this the violas have got to be the melody voice, right? So like diminuendo, and then matching up pretty well with the horn, right? So really great, and then here, like with them both going to forte, you don't really have to pull your punch too much with a single horn if it's not going to last very long, right? So that's all really nicely done. But yeah, having the violas come in at mezzo forte, absolutely right. So yeah, and then the winds above. Yeah, it's just really really nice. Very very great proportions, and then that leading to right. The leftover winds pushing towards this color here. Yeah, da 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 dum. Okay, so like this is a little risky right in here, putting this second flute down here. But since everything is so soft, you're kind of you basically have got a wind quintet right in here, not with the horn. So you can kind of get away with it, but yeah, but the second flute is a bit weak down there, you know. Yeah, I mean maybe there would be some different way of putting it together. It is such a beautiful color. I don't want to screw around with it, but yeah, yeah, and then this little push right here into this. Yeah, so it's really really nice, and then that it completely sets the stage for solo solo strings right in here. Yeah, slightly disappointing bite to the bow on the solo stuff, but it's just one of those things where like they're assuming that your solo scoring with their sound set is going to be sort of either a bit sentimental or it might be sort of violin concerto like, right? So they make a more aggressive start to each pitch. Yeah, so solo cello, absolutely the perfect voice to put in there, and then answered, which is great at the same pitch, right? By violins or violin and solo violin, and it works, just absolutely great because of of all of the space that you've got, right? It literally is a transcription of what happened before, right? Just using the harp as the kind of the piano's ability to roll and so on, but it because of the different qualities, it just it doesn't sound derivative or too repetitive. Yeah, and this little trading off on the way down is really nice. Yeah, with muted everybody. Yeah, so muted tuba. So you're gonna have this like in performance. You're gonna have this really beautiful. Just this everything would be completely serene, absolutely gorgeous. The way that everything is coming to the end here, and then right on this bar, the tuba player is going to pick up this massive road cone and stick it in the bell of their instrument, or somewhere in between here these points, right? I have a friend who plays tuba, and he sort of rigged up a tuba mute that had a handle to it, and he worked it out so that like he could just really easily pick it up and stick it in the bell of his instrument and pull it back out again because of the way the handle was all set up, the way it rested on the bell, the way it could sit on the chair next to him and everything else. So yeah, so there may be a slight degree of amusement involved in just plopping in a mute here in the tuba, and the thing about it is that like what is it going to do to the sound of the tuba is yeah, it'll make it quieter, but it's not necessarily going to make it sound more beautiful, right? Um, it almost has like more of a trombone sound, right? After you stick the mute in, and it just really depends on the model of tuba and the tuba player and so on. But yeah, I mean, it is kind of a duller sound, but it's fine to put in there. I think you get the same exact effect if you had like bassoon there rather than tuba, but this will be a beautiful tranquil chord, and the color certainly sounds fantastic in the mock-up. So the ending is really, really great. Everything really adds up together nicely, and I'm pointing out some of the caveats and some of the quirks and things like that, but there's no question that this all works really, really awesomely. So let's jump back to the beginning of D and then move forward again and sort of look at everything in between those 2 points, going up to E. Now, if there is one kind of overall observation that I would have here, and that is that your poco più mosso just feels a little too poco and not enough più. Do you know what I mean? I think it could be just a little, like, we sort of have this kind of curve to the tempo, and then kind of pushing back to a little faster. And I think that it could be even a little faster. Do you know what I mean? And then this just feels really sudden, I mean, I feel like there needs to be an accelerando. If you're going to go up to that speed for your più mosso, I think that you need to get there gradually. I think that just suddenly getting there is a little unnatural. And I think it's interesting, the allargando seems to be here rather than here. If my memory isn't playing tricks with me. Yeah. Okay, all right, so let's dive into this now. And I think this is just a gorgeous, gorgeous idea right in here for D. It's almost like a C-type idea, right? Like the kind of calm, with the restlessness under the exterior. But I like the combinations of pizzicato and arco, and I like that how they're all kind of cascading downwards. The pizzicato following the arco, following the pizzicato, and so on. Just really neat ideas here, and I think this absolutely does fulfill the evaluation criteria in terms of like connecting the cascading octaves, figuring out what is the function of, is this separate or anticipatory, the little pizzicato that you interpreted here, the octaves in the piano score. I think that's just very well calculated, right? But like, as far as like this continuing onwards and leading to this texture, right? What is bridging the gap to here is really the brass, right? And they hit this hard and then they stay full as the strings continue. So then what happens here is that there is a bit of a lapse of fullness, right? Whereas if we were to hit this hard and then pull out, then like it really becomes more about the strings, right? And then with the occasional push from the horns, right? So tying up the strings and continuing to interpret that cascades all the way through, and without building string color leading to this moment, is what sort of makes this, in my view, necessary to sort of fade out the brass right in here, and to kind of think about some of those things, and also that also just ties into the accelerando here, because the abruptness of the string color just suddenly entering the picture and taking over, while the brass sort of seemed to kind of fall off here. There's a risk there of things kind of having a blocky feeling, where I know you don't intend that at all. You want everything to be really smoothly connected. So I would say smoothly connect, like just go a little faster here in your mock-up, and then I would say accelerate here, because I know that the conductor will probably just do that anyways to get to the più mosso, right? And then and then where you put the poco allargando, I think if I'm remembering it right, right here, that makes more sense to me with the way that you've scored things. All right, so yeah, so speaking of functions, getting back to the first trumpet right in here. This is just really a lovely idea, really soft, heavy brass. And yeah, and so notice everybody, like the balance that Peter has got here, just how easy it is to hear all these different functions. That just because they're so separate from each other, and because the balance is so beautifully taken care of, right? So even though we have pianissimo, crescendo, poco a poco, it really, it gets up to a mezzo piano. It's not really that big, and then drops back down to piano, crescendo to forte, right? Mezzo forte here, but forte there. So it's very carefully calculated to not start overwhelming this very, very gradual increase from piano to forte, right? And I like this little lift right in here to kind of keep it from just really sounding separate, so that the start of this dive down an octave will have a little bit of individuality to it. I had a similar situation. I had a cellos doing in this upcoming in this concert that just happened at the beginning of the month, that will be released for everybody to check out in, I don't know, sometime next year. So there is this like beautiful arcing ostinato in the cellos, which kind of went da 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 ba da 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 ba da da, right? And the problem is that it was just sounding too connected, and like leading into the next bar wasn't quite coming through. So I asked the cellist to just leave a little gap, a little breath, da 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 da, and that just made all the difference. So it wasn't enough to change the direction of the bow to create the emphasis of the beginning of the new articulated phrase and a slur. It was necessary to have a little bit of a rest, so that the beginning of the bow would have that kind of impact. And we see that same thing here, right? So, so sometimes things that really play smooth might end up sounding too smooth, right, for the right kind of rhythmic emphasis. And, so it's just a question like whether or not this should be slurred, right, as it is in the piano score. Da. Of course, you wouldn't want to slur forward like it has like the actual piano slurs, but da 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 da, I think would work really good. But of course, I mean, if you really want dun 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 da 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 da, yeah, I don't know, it just feels a little. Maybe just a little too pointy. Do you know what I mean? Lovely little bits of tuba in here coming in to reinforce the pizzicato. That's nice. I wonder if this should be, instead of an accent, if you really want to get to match up with the articulation of the pizzicato basses, if you might want something that was more like a tenuto staccato, like a to go along with the dong, right? But with the accent, you do get the almost the sound of the feeling of the pluck, right? It's just the question then whether or not the duration of the note starts to kind of take over, right, from the pizzicato and to obscure it a little bit. Yeah, so it's kind of cool to be able to talk over some of these finer points. Yeah, and then just getting a nice fat sound as we go towards this big, this big push forward. It's almost a situation where, I might want, like on the last bar or two, maybe from the middle of the half bar or something, like I might put in, even though I've written crescendo poco poco back here, I might put in yet another hairpin pushing forwards, just to really get everybody on board, and just, hey, we're going for this mountain. We are going to really get to a nice, rich, loud forte here. Okay, so that is exquisite. It's gorgeous, right? Again, and once again, I mean, you are a string player, you know what you're doing, but you know, I wouldn't bother putting this in myself. And I'm also a bit of a string player, but I just think that it's pretty obvious that this would be down, up, down. Yeah, I mean, especially if you're going to go long bows on this, right? Yeah, and yeah, so yeah, I like all this. You know, this real Ravel spot is the way I'm starting to think about it. You know, just like the richness of the chords and the voicing and so on. Yeah. Now this works pretty well. The trading off between the two parts. I think that this is all fine. Um, yeah, I'm not a huge fan of this D down here, right? Yeah, you know, you got the open D in the middle and then the finger D, and yeah, I mean, it's all doable. It's just, I'm just wondering if it's just, you know, maybe unnecessary. Like if you are going to have some notes you trade off with, does there need to be the extra emphasis here of the doubling on this lower D pitch, right? Could it just kind of make everybody's life a little bit easier to just let the double basses handle that low D, right? Rather than, you know, kind of having triple octave diving up and down. Well, I think you're a cellist, just from what I remember. So, like, if you think that that part is cool for you, it's fine with me. I'm trying to think what that would be like on viola. I mean, it's not too big of an ask. It's kind of have to jump over a string, but yeah, it's no big deal, I guess. Yeah, and then the timpani in here, the timpani part is great. Um, right, so I love that you have just enough support here. Oboe and first oboe and first clarinet, and you know, once again, there's really no need for second voice rests here, right? Just tell us that this is each of these people are number one, right? Yeah, and this is kind of cool too. That like you are throwing the like the octave doubling up here to the flutes as we go forward. Well, we're going to talk about that in a minute, right? So you have the triple octave of flute on top, first violins in the middle, and then all four horns below, right? So like there's so much weight at the bottom here that there's a chance that it might just shout over what's on top, right? So it's this sort of situation where I would almost prefer that you had put in like, you know, that you had you stick with a divisi here and have octaves, right, in your first violins, and then somebody strong supporting this part of the triple octave in winds, right? But we'll talk about that more as we get to the next page, right? But yeah, the little touches here of harmony in the horns, it's all really delicately, beautifully, painstakingly scored. It's, you know, it's a transitional section really from this to the big, you know, massive tutti. So let's just head there, right? All right, so let's kind of look at the, you know, just sort of break it down: melody, accompaniment, bass, and so on. I mean, the constituents of this of the whole idea for Barvinsky are necessarily simple here at the climax of the piece, because I mean, you just look at the score, right? You know, you have to build a tutti out of an octave melody that has some harmony built into it, plus, you know, chunk, 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 and then rising up and down, you know, which you have beautifully scored out. It's just really, really nice. And it's interesting, you don't leave a gap at the beginning. You start right on the downbeat, and that's also very cool. Now, the thing that I like about this the most is the smoothness by which you get from here to there, right? With maybe, you know, just thinking about some of my suggestions about increase of tempo and like in the, you know, hopefully not falling off the cliff when you just suddenly cut off the brass and so on. But, you know, it still is a nice smooth transition to this, and this leads forward to to the juicy part of D right here. All right. But it's not just that. It's also that you tell a story. You have, just like the beginning of the piece and the end of the piece, you progress the texture and you progress the functions, right? And you give everybody different things to do, which is nice because it doesn't wear anybody out, right? So just things to point out for people out there to observe is how the trumpets are all going, and then when ba bum ba bum, the first trumpet gets a chance gets a bite at the apple, at the melodic apple, and the lower trumpets get to go back and forth, well, ba 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 ba, that kind of thing, right? And then here, our players get to join in, all the heavy brass get to join in on harmonizing the melody, right? And so let's, rather than me just sort of spoiling everything by getting too far, let's just notice that, like, from where we started, we have basically 3 or 4, let's say 4 sections where the functions change from part to part, and yet there's a consistency of force, there's a consistency of intensity, and there's a really nice push up here to the climax, and then the diminuendo and the like with the way that this is all planned out. That was the reason, with the changes of color and the changes of function, is why I was completely giving you a pass for building in a really long, steady diminuendo towards the end of the page, right? Because I felt that, like, it makes sense because you are telling a story with the music rather than just completely transcribing. Probably told more of a story than I did with my arrangement, I would say. So let's look at those functions. Let's analyze how well they're working, and so on and so forth. So right in here, I feel that this is possibly the most programmatic. Programmatic. It is programmatic, but it's also possibly problematic. Do the first violins and the flutes on top have enough force to contribute an intense sound above these quadruple horns with all the other junk that's happening around them, the arcing oboes and all these other things. And I just have the suspicion, I just feel that there needs to be something more, some extra guy right, needs to be contributing. And I think you could completely solve this problem just by having octaves in your first violins, and maybe possibly even just octave flutes there, but which is, I don't know, the second flute still isn't quite strong enough. But if you had octave flutes and you could spare one of these players to support the middle of the triple octave, then I think you would just about have the right balance. Now, I know it sounds fantastic in the mock-up, but I just feel that there's not quite enough strength for an even sound. It'll work-ish, right? And what I want is for the approach to work without the ish, right? I want it to be absolutely. I don't want it to be a situation where the conductor turns to you during the rehearsal and says, "Well, hey Peter, do you mind if we cut the second and fourth horn there and just have it be first and third, because it just feels like it's pretty heavy there, and I'm having a hard, like, the overtones are kind of killing the second violins there, and it sort of makes the flutes feel a little lonely." Or they might not even have to say that, you might just hear it, right? So I just worry about just how, but having said all of that, these horns work so great against everything else happening, like all of this blabbing away with the trumpets and the strings and the middle winds and everything else. The horns just cut through like it was nothing. They cut through it like it was butter, right? It's really, really nicely done. I'm just going to check one thing really quickly. Sorry, I went a little too far. So there's just marked forte. So they will be fine. Okay. And fortissimo. So here you have forte for the flute. Okay. They'll probably will end up just matching whatever they think that they need to play, right? So like the question is like isn't even so much like is it loud enough to cope with everything else that's going on? Because I guess like you really dig in, your violinists really dig in furiously, and so and your flute players just start cranking away at this and just blasting out their top line. Yeah, you can balance with the horns, but do you want that kind of cruder sound, or do you want more of a mixed, moderated sound that has this beautiful, encompassing triple octave, right? That really is this massive, even kind of sound. So that's just the thought that I have here. Doesn't mean that what you have written here doesn't work. It's just I'm wondering if there's some way of improving that, right? Okay, and then like here, I have nothing but approval for the way that you have seen immediately. The need to have an arc that goes up, then an arc that goes down, and so on, and then just completely interpreting every possible pitch that could be stuck in there, and more than I did, right? You definitely you put in one on the downbeat, which is something I chose to like leave out so that you hear the boom at the beginning of each. Of these low pitches, but the thing about that is like maybe that makes that boom too regular, right? So maybe your approach works a whole lot better than mine. But it's really great to see the stacks, right? We've got the the oboe, clarinets, and bassoons working in these octaves, and wow, it just really has this beautiful, furious sound. And then English horn and bass clarinet, the trumpets and middle strings here, all kind of working together in those repeated harmonies, chunk, 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 chunk. Yeah, and then leaving a little gap, da 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 da, right? It just works so great. But I noticed that you don't leave a gap for your middle strings here, right? It's kind of an interesting thing. Does this mean that you could possibly continue to have the repeated notes rather than the arcing notes, right? Maybe this is the intention and this is the mistake, right? Anyway, but I mean, it does like you can get the best of both worlds just continuing with your strings and just leaving a gap there too, right? All right, and yeah, so nice. And then like when we get up to the scream, right? You throw in the piccolo, and we've got the flutes doubling from below, this time joining up with the first violins, and then below that we've got the cellos, right? And the trumpets, right? And that is just such a solid sound, just amazingly, I mean, just imagine how fun it is, people out there in TV land. Yeah, for that, for the cellos to be playing along with the trumpets in their tenor register. Yeah, just what a kick. It's just so fun. Yeah. I mean, and it's just like all you need is one trumpet player if they're playing triple F. I don't know if you really need this. I mean, it's going to be an amazing sound. It just like, you'll just hear that trumpet blasting. See if you can go look up there's this great recording that was made of the Milhaud's Suite Provençale, and the first trumpet player of that orchestra in that recording just makes the entire piece about him. He turns it into this big trumpet concerto, and he's got the power too. I think he's a Spanish player, I think, and he just has this force and this intensity while still having the like kind of that lighter, more trebly sound. Yeah, I think he's playing a C instrument. But yeah, anyways, so yeah, that is just like everything that might have been an issue here is like completely solved here, and at the same time, like you're just putting on the pressure here with the repeated notes in your your reeds, right? And then we've got going on in trumpets and your middle strings. So here is a situation where like this is totally not going to balance, but it kind of doesn't matter because everybody's just bellowing away. And I mean, could you spare a couple of could you spare a couple of horns? You know, maybe not. I mean, I really love the way that the horns kind of help the whole screaming quality of what's going on with the trumpet and so on. It's just a really wonderful color, you know, underpowered strings or not, right? Like you could have, you know, you could have held back a little bit on the dynamics here, but like where would be the fun of that, right? And you know, and meanwhile, I sort of neglected to mention the bass, but it's all pretty, you know. I like the way that you don't overdo it on your bass instruments at first. You just have contrabassoon plus lower strings, right? And then when the cellos get all tied up, you can gradually progress forwards, right, to tuba and contra plus bassoons and and just kind of harmony between there and so on with your bass trombone and trombones and horns working together. Yeah, and then and this is just so cool. The way that this cools down, but gets more integrated. It's really a lovely, just lovely brass scoring right in there. Yeah. Yeah, diminuendo, but still accented, right? So fortissimo. So obviously by here it's like about forte, and then mezzo forte, still with accents. Yeah. So yeah, so going for yet another color here with the horns, you buddy, that bubble, 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 bubble. Yeah, that it just really ties together. And this part really reminds me the most of like kind of almost like Ravel, right? You know, just like maybe a that really awesome part of his piano concerto for the left hand has some similarities. Yeah, and then this nice intense unison, bum 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 bum. I don't even think you need the flute up here. You know what I mean? Like, because like the overtones are going to do all the work from your trumpets and violins and so on. All right. So there's a chance that this will just get swallowed, in a live situation because of the intensity of the unison below it from everybody else. But I mean, you leave it in just for a little bit of earth shine, right? Yeah, and then this is interesting. Da da, and then this, this kind of little almost chuckling mezzo staccato here. Yeah, it works beautifully, really really nicely done. And then that just takes us to the beginning of E, which we already talked about. So yeah, so my analysis of this section is really great work. I didn't even mention your punches here on bass drum and the rolls in the timpani, and just like I love the way this tails off here. I would give this a destination dynamic of P or even pianissimo, and just little tushes on the cymbal. I don't know. I mean, how long do you really want this to last? Do you want to last the whole bar? Just write in, a dotted whole note. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. I almost feel like we're getting into a period where this is used as a shorthand too much. Like I think that most of the time the orchestrator should decide how long he wants or she wants a tam tam or a cymbal crash to just last, right? And then write out what is the duration, right? I think that that's more helpful than just, like if the player is holding a pair of dishes, right? Then like sort of leaving it up to them to think about how long, till the decay is final. Then that's sort of what you're doing here. All right, but very, very cool. I love it all. Let's jump back to the beginning of the piece now. So looking at this, I think that it's really beautifully put together. I mean, there are a lot of things that or a few things, one or two little things that I might have a slight difference with you on. Like, for instance, I feel that that this pizzicato here in the middle of the bar is a bit out of character for orchestrating a an impressionistic work, right? Because it kind of adds pacing, right? Right here, like the whole kind of floating quality of the sixth chord, without like a firm bass note. I feel has a just kind of, it sort of wants to float where it's going to float, and I think when you pin it down by, adding a rhythmic emphasis in the middle of the bar here, it just makes everything too regular, right? So we end up like bonk, 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 right? So if I were to say, cut anything, I would say cut this, right? Everything else, like the pizzicato, works beautifully with all the other parts. So, there are little things like that I might have here and there, but it doesn't mean that what you've scored doesn't work, right? And especially like the beautiful balance that you've got going on here. This wonderful stack here, first flute, English horn, first clarinet, and bassoon all working together so nicely. With the English horn and the bassoon doing the harmony below, and the first clarinet and first flute working together on the melodic octaves. And then the horns coming in here really soft, just to play those notes that extend. I almost feel like you should start a little early, right? Just like starting the sounding G right here with one of the horns, just so that this is more smooth, right? Just the way that it is tied across in the piano score. But I mean, just such a beautiful color. Once again, like if you're going to tell us this is number one, then you don't have to overstate it, right? By adding a second voice rest. Just kill your second voice rests until you get something like this, where you really have to kind of show when the second player comes in and why, like right here, this is all perfectly fine, but before then, right, this you could just kill all the second voice rests here, so long as you've given us the number one. And then like same thing here, like just get rid of all these second voice rests, but here, of course, you need them to show when the second player comes in. Okay. Now the big strength here, though, is that you are telling me a story with your emotional and timbral progression, right? Absolutely, the beautiful gentleness at the beginning, and then giving way over to just like the little touch of melancholy here, working between clarinets and flute and oboe, right? So even though like the flute is on top, because you've changed the context, the oboe gives a different quality of overtones to the flute, rather than it's so radically different from the clarinet below that it doesn't feel like you're overusing the flute up here, almost, right? And then and then the addition of the horns, bringing in the strings, this big push towards the forte, this all works great. And then just a little bit of extra softening down here to pianissimo. I think you could do the same thing. I know this is a different function, but I think you could do the same thing for the horns, just so that by the time you get here, there isn't a sense of dropping off from the intensity of the horn sound. Yeah. And and good on you for like really figuring out what you're going to do about the repeated pitches here, not dropping on the piano style scoring, and and giving us a firm downbeat, right? So people just notice this, like if you have been following along and maybe have also done some of your orchestrations throughout this challenge. Like, did you notice how smooth and just the beautiful flow here, and yet Peter did not have slurs that went across the downbeat, right? Like there was an articulation on the downbeats and the important places, right? And then here, like these, it was really, you'd really hear the precision of the dotted rhythm here. Da 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 da. It's like it has, it just really has a lot of life and push to it. Yeah, and just really lovely in here. Yeah, just good functional doubling, and because you've set everything up here with this push, with the winds and the brass, or excuse me, winds and the horns. When the rest of these winds come in, they don't feel like they are piling on too hard, right? Yeah, it's just really nicely calculated. Yeah. All right, so getting into the juicy part now. Yeah, so really, just really active cello part right in here, and yeah, I'm just kind of thinking, semi-pro wise, and I mean it'll be an active part. I mean it's doable, but yeah, just there's a lot of kind of leaps back and forth and so on under a yeah. I mean a lot of cellists eat this for lunch, but maybe if there's a way of just maybe using the I don't know yeah just one thing that I would say is that this you should match this slur in the cello part, right? So that like in all the parts, right? I think if you're going to go dun 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 in your horns, I think that these instruments should share the same articulation so that they're unified. Yeah. And if you're going to break this up, right? It, it, um, then maybe there's a different way of I mean I feel it's not just so much like what the cello can do, which is fantastic. It's just the most amazing instrument. Maybe if there's a way that it can like more smoothly flow. Do you know what I mean? I just starting on the second eighth, I'm not so sure I'm completely on board with that kind of flow, but I mean there definitely is a way of making it sound smooth. And I mean some cello players are just amazing. The principal cellist of the orchestra that I worked with at the beginning of the month, I mean, God, that guy's to die for. He could play in any orchestra, and he was just so focused on it. I mean, here I had these crossover arrangements, right? And he was practicing all the way to the last second he could possibly practice, and like all the other cellists were like taking a break, eating a cookie, having some tea, having a biscuit, but like he just wanted to work everything out perfectly so that he could really lead the section and just be absolutely, he was the closest guy to the microphone during the recording session, right? So yeah, and man, it did work. The cellos were just incredible. All right, so so I'm just wondering if the cello part here could be like maybe simplified for a little bit for just I mean I think that the flow. So like, what worries me about the flow is the leap up to the D. It's really and I feel it's a little premature with the arc, and I mean it's yeah, I'm sure that like, you being a cellist, if you are able to write this and feel good about it, then I'm fine with it. But I'm just wondering if that fits in with the flow, that leap up to the D. That's all. Alrighty, so not to get caught up in it. So nice soft horns right in here. That's working good. Low clarinet and bass clarinet. It's just a beautiful, beautiful sound right in there. And then helping out, duties with the first violins. We've got the flute on top. That's nice. It's a lot of flute in a row by this point, but it doesn't sound bad. And then, English horn taking the octave. That's really nice. And then trading off to oboe and clarinet. And I think that's a lovely freshening of the color. I mean, these two could also be swapped, right? Possibly. And then like the bassoon kind of taking over on the foghorn notes. Yeah, it has a wonderful sound of smoothness to it. Don't get me wrong about like kind of pondering about this a little too much. Yeah, and then then we have like the low held D down here in your second horn. So like here we have a fourth horn. I mean, here you have like a situation where the octave relationship of the which bassoon? Bassoon one. And your fourth horn, that could be enough to steady it. And this is like not an unsteady note at all, right? It goes on for a while. It would be my only concern. But I mean, yeah, pro hornist, no big deal at all. But it's good to have a partner in crime down there. So this is nice, this octave writing right in here. And then of course, like once the bass clarinet comes in, they've got their partner. Yeah, and this is all very cool. Da 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 da. Yeah, just really nicely done. I wonder if that is a little much on the piccolo there, but but just so long as it doesn't overdo it, right? You let go of it pretty well, and then like pretty soon, and then the bass clarinet working together with the cellos and so on. This all is really nice. And I love the division of functions here in your cellos. I think that's just really gorgeous. Yeah, and helping wind everything down little by little. It's kind of strange, like the little crescendo and then diminuendo. Maybe like throw us a hairpin. Tell us how long that diminuendo is. Right? Does it go from here to there? Right? Is it all the way through the two bars? Yeah, I mean, just like coming after the hairpin is just a little strange. The way that it's scored. Is that something that's in the original? It's hard to keep track of all these things. Yeah, and I actually, like, in my evaluation criteria, yeah, there it is. It's on the third bar of B. Yeah, yeah, I would maybe use hairpins as more than diminuendo. Yeah, just to really fine tune it. And then harp right in here. And, here, like, philosophically, once again, like, I disagree with a little bit of how this is framed. Like, for instance, I feel that the G should be dovetailed on, even though they're completely different timbres. I think that, I think that's a smoother, rather than a handoff. I think a dovetail would bring the parts together a little bit more naturally. And then here, I think this is a wrong note, or perhaps you just, yeah. I guess you rewrote that. I'm looking at the, yeah. Yeah, see, so like I kind of I disagree with this too, going up to the E and then having this start down on the A. I mean, I think that the way that it's composed, I think that the line has more of a natural arc to it with the way that Barvinsky scored it. With these last three notes being E A E A da da dum, da 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 da, rather than da da dee da 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 da. I just feel this little E guy here is is just a little out of place. So, and the other thing too is that, like, I feel that there should be diminuendo here rather than this kind of staying at full board. Like, I think the diminuendo should happen sooner, right? So, like, sooner rather than throughout. Maybe a diminuendo, like, right away, like over the first bar, so that by the time the flute enters here, it is just incredibly soft, and then tremolo on the pianissimo, right? Yeah, and then this is all beautifully done right in here. Yeah, really nice. All right, now leading to our moment of calm. with a restless undercurrent. Now, it's kind of interesting. Like you've chosen to score this with the, excuse me, with the undercurrent kind of becoming an overcurrent in places. Overcurrent, is that sort of like overshoes? I'm wondering. So yeah, so it's like you're allowing the octaves to jump above the melody in places, or up to the melody in places, and that's all good. And it's a pretty good representation, if I might say. Bass clarinet, and then clarinet and flutes above, right? So like you start off, and I feel that this is really beautifully scored, and the first flute is all right, even though these lower G's are really not going to come through all that well, but it's right on the edge of what is going to work for a low flute. All right. Obviously, the G is like this G in the middle is not low, but like these other ones, the connectivity and everything else, the bassoons are the biggest problem here in terms of being able to hear this flute, just because of their overtones. But you got a little bit of a combination with your second violins, but since they're not playing like they're playing an octave apart, there isn't a string tone that is going to come down here and tame the overtones, right? So they're pretty barren, like they're somewhat naked, right? And then when they are in that place, they start to interfere with our ability to hear the flute, and you can hear that in the mock-up, right? Yeah, but oboe and English horn and octaves is always a beautiful sound, and yeah, and here you're going with an enclosure of the harmony, and that's all good. As long as you have the G's writing on the bottom, you're okay with the impressionist harmony. All right, but here we're going to come in with trumpets, and the trumpets are going to get louder, and they're going to get louder and louder, and our poor flutes are basically just dead on the water at that point, right? So here's where I would hike them up. Right, you can easily add an octave. Right, if you're going to get up to forte, by the time you get up to forte, you can, your flute's going to be jumping up to the G, and and they can build from there. And the same thing with the clarinets can start to build, and maybe they can start taking over this notch, and so on. Right, but I just feel that that's the that's really the only real problem I see right in here of in terms of balance. Like everything else is just so exquisite, right? And just so carefully planned and thought out, and so on and so forth. But like when the trumpets come in, they're just slaying those flutes. Sadly, sad to say, because I really like what you're doing here. Yeah, then bum bum bum. Yeah, and everything else. I like the first oboe thickening up the trumpet. And trumpet doesn't have to play this accented A too loudly. It's still going to be really strong, written A, sounding G. I would put an accent on the violins, right? So just like whatever articulation you're giving to your oboe and your oboes and your trumpets, you should be giving to your other parts here, so that they match in terms of the punch right at the beginning of the beat. And especially if you're going to go thump with your timpani and your bass drum there too. But just such a beautiful color in here. It's just all really well done. I'm just sitting here nitpicking, but the honest truth is that like if you were just to sit down now, or if you were to have already, extracted the parts, separated out the flows into instrument parts, and put them on stands and everything, and there was a reading or a rehearsal and then a performance, it would still sound fantastic. You probably would notice some things like the flutes getting killed here, or other little bits and pieces that I might have brought up, but it doesn't mean that the score wouldn't be a satisfying performance. This is ready for the stands, despite all of my little nitpicks. But look, if you can use any of those nitpicks, then that's great. If any of them are constructive, and look, and if they're not, don't bother about defending one point or another. You are a valid artist. You are, your orchestration worked. You don't have to defend anything, Peter. All right, just really, really nice work. So yeah, so you know, I mean, it's the kind of thing I hope you do get performed, right? Anybody out there with a orchestra this size who wants to perform it, get in touch with Peter. And I could say the same for several scores. I think, people can pick them out for themselves. Conductors who want a very cool little bit of Barvinsky, and, my orchestration is also available, but I'm not going to say it's better than other, pro quality orchestrations. So, so thank you so much, Peter, for the work that you put into this and the patience with which you've sat through me picking apart your beautiful orchestration. And, the good humor and the helpfulness that you have shown throughout this entire process. And, just been so supportive of other orchestrators. And just, I mean, you get what I am trying to do here so well, of constructive feedback, and you've even had some constructive feedback for me too, and I appreciate that as well. So, that is really awesome. But, the best part of it was that through this whole process, you were able to help me help some people who were really in trouble right now. So, I'm not going to go into it over and over, but I just want you to know I personally appreciate that, from me to you. And, to everybody out there watching this who's made it this far, if you have not yet left a comment for Peter below, then please do. It's like if you make it to the 1 hour point of these videos, then you have to leave a comment. Those are the rules. Not really, but maybe. But yeah, just once again, just always makes me happy to see this kind of orchestration, and to see everybody's work all put together into one big pile, and to work through it slowly and to share it with the world, and to hear what you guys have to say. That is always just makes me so happy. So so thanks again to everybody, and I will see you soon with another great score.